This is Robbie Melton, 75 years old at this time. Been around since just before 1950. The dogs and I are just sitting here on Talbot Hill looking down toward town. The leaves are not on yet, so I can still have a pretty good view. I try to think about what things were like when I was being raised, which is a time from about 1950 to 1970. So the 50s and the 60s, and how much things have changed because they're a lot different. Things seem like they move slowly, but then when you look at the whole thing, it's we were a very different town then. Uh, Claremore is about a mile square at that time. Your southern line is about Claremore Street. There's some that go across Highway 88, but mostly Claremore Street on the south, Sioux Street on the east, Blue Star Drive on the north, and Awela on the west. And it's hard to think that there was a Blue Star particularly. I mean, it was just fields. It was the old airport, there was just a barbed wire fence going down just down an asphalt street with bar ditches there. They put in the what was called they called the hospital the Claremore Health Center in 1955, and so that kind of pushed that north a little bit, and then around 1960 there started being some movement up that way, but basically within that mile is where things happened, and there were. It was different. You have to consider that most families, if they had a car at all, just had one car, and so lots of times the husband took the car to work, and the women were left at home without a car. But you just right in that mile area, you had that I can think of, and I'm sure I've forgotten things, but you had Pig's Grocery there at Levira and Second Street, or what they call Patty Page now. Wilson's Grocery at Third and Seminole. There was another little grocery up at 10th and Seminole. East Side Grocery was pretty big. It was at Fifth and Wewoka. House Grocery at 7th and Choctaw, and that's where it was just across from Claremont School. And there's where a lot of the kids went. And speaking of that, remember there was nothing north of Blue Star, so none of that school complex up there was there. They built Lanto Field up there in the middle of the field in about 59, 60, but otherwise everything was just a lot more compact. And there are a couple of grocery stores in Radium Town. There was one on the west side out about Chambers, but my point is that you were never over half a mile from a grocery store, we had good sidewalks, and people just kind of walked. And there's 5 or 6 grocery stores in the downtown area. It was just a lot more compact. Main Street basically went from track to track, and that's it. You had the Everett lumber yard on the east side of the tracks there, and Pixley's hadn't moved out on the railroad yet. They just until that was after up in the 70s. But you had O.E. Woods Lumber Company there. Grain elevators all over the place. The O'Bannon grain elevator right on the Frisco tracks at Will Rogers burned down in a huge fire in 1956. This was a farm town, and you had chick hatcheries and grain elevators. Another Maggie Dowling's grain elevator on 4th Street. Al Pettigrove's feed, seed, and fertilizer up and down the street. Just a lot of things as you'd think of in terms of a farm town. You had Rawson's John Deere right on the Frisco tracks, and Melton's had International Harvester at Fourth and Missouri. Joe Ellis had Alice Chalmer, I believe, over by the grain elevator, and Joe was the one who, in the mid '50s, built the big grain elevator that we still have now. Main Street was they decorated it up. I remember us winning awards for decorations, and most of us that see the old pictures of Claremore, they see the one with the big Christmas tree in the center of the intersections, which was a big deal. But no, we had when I was growing up, a lot more lighting, a lot more stuff. If you remember, if you may have noticed a star up on the top of the grain elevator. That's I don't know, it's probably 6 feet at least, and there was several of those on every block. They liked having parades downtown. I was in a band, and they they had parades for everything. You'd have the rodeo parade, and then the homecoming parade, and the Will Rogers Day parade, and then the football parade, and then the Christmas parade. But at least you didn't have to walk now like they do. Gosh, from the expo coming, that's a parade's a big deal now. I mean, we just went to one end and it was over. They used to call them whoosh parades because they can't happen pretty fast. But it was an interesting thing downtown, and downtown was, you have to consider that you just didn't run. There was no Walmart, there was no Lowe's, and you didn't just run to Tulsa for everything. Highway 66 was 2 lane, and it went all the way down around. There was no I-44. There was no turnpike until the late '50s, so you just drove down to 11th Street or Admiral and into Tulsa was it was pretty much an hour to get downtown, and there were no shopping malls at that time, so you would have to go to downtown Tulsa. What it meant was the town had to be more independent. I mean, it was long distance to call Tulsa on the phone. And everybody liked trying to keeping it separated like that. So downtown was a community. People who worked in town, and a lot of people did, basically stayed downtown. You ate downtown. If you need to go to the bank, well, you walked over the bank. If you need to pay the city, you walked out of the city, paid your bill. Or if you needed a haircut, well, you went to the barber shop. And it was all right there, and that part of it is different. But one thing that's not different is that everybody had to park somewhere. You're looking at, as I got to counting here, I counted 97, so I know that we're going to be over 100 businesses, and I went and counted the side streets and everything, and the best I could tell, best case, 200 parking places. So that means that if everybody who owned a business and their assistant came to work and parked downtown, then there is zero room for customers. And this is something that's gone. That is not new. It's gone on for all that period of time, and there have been all kinds of different ways to try to deal with it. One thing was they told people to say, well, for gosh sakes, quit parking in front of your business. And so people did that. They just started parking in front of somebody else's business. And well, that didn't work out very well. And tried all kinds of different things. One of the first things that I remember was the 2-hour parking. So that meant that the car was supposed to be moved every 2 hours legally. And some people went out and moved the cars, but most of the time people just ignored it. And so then the city hired Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott was an interesting guy, very mild-mannered gentleman. Usually, you had it on a gray sport coat and a gray felt hat, sometimes a cigar. and he walked with a large stick, a walking stick that had a piece of chalk made into the end of it. And he walked down through all the cars on Main Street and the side streets, and he just put a little chalk mark on the tire of the car, and it went and made a chalk mark, and just went down there very slowly and easily, and it would have taken quite a while to make that walk, because he would have had to go from 4th Street to Patty Page on each of the side streets, and of course Main Street. Main Street itself, there's maybe 90 parking places, and so they walk those out and make sure that they're marked. Then 2 hours later, he comes out down the street again, and if the car has been moved, or if the car just got there, it's not going to have a mark on it. But if there is a piece of the chalk mark still on the tire, that means the car hasn't been moved. It has been over 2 hours, and so theoretically they get a ticket. Now, Mr. Scott didn't give everybody tickets, but he gave out a lot of tickets, and that was one way of trying to deal with it. And you just go in and talk to people, say, well, you need to move your car, or you need to have your wife bring you to work or something, to try to deal with the parking difficulties, then I can still remember when they got the parking meters. Oh my, what a howl on that! And the merchant says, "Oh, all our business is going to go to Pryor. Pryor doesn't have parking meters, and so they're going to go over there." But I had to do something, because essentially it was keeping the business people and workers from parking in front of their own places, because they had nowhere else to park, and there was just no room for customers. So they got the parking meters, and they had to enforce that. And so they hired a tricycle police motorcycle. It had a big wide body back, and it had an official kind of gold leaf City of Claremore seal on the back of it, and they hired a rookie cop to run the motorcycle. His name was Tubby Williams. And as you saw him spread across the motorcycle seat, you kind of see where he got his name. Tubby came on to be very well thought of. Ended up being chief of police later on, but he had to go around and decide who, when those meters were expired, to write a ticket. I mean, the money was not that big a deal. You could go, I don't know, 10 or 12 minutes for a nickel, or an hour for a quarter, something like that. It wasn't that, but the fact is it only went for 2 hours. And so we were going to have to go back every 2 hours and plug the meter. But that's just kind of the way it worked, the way life worked. I thought it was interesting. Every town has its characters. And Minor Gordon, who's the younger Dr. Gordon, had his office on the corner of where his dad had the office. They're over what was Western Auto then, Ann's Cleaters later on, entered off Will Rogers, and they always had a joke that if you could make it up those steps to Dr. Gordon's office, you didn't need a doctor. But I remember a brand new 1964 Thunderbird. It was burgundy and had a gold interior in it. Oh, it was pretty. But he parked it on the corner, and it was in front of his business, and he just wasn't going to put money in the meter, and so they put the yellow tickets on, the big yellow tickets they put on there, and then you were supposed to stick your money in it, and then put it in one of the little boxes that they had. But Doc wouldn't do it, and it was just kind of the idea. My family's owned this building 100 years. I'm not going to pay to park in front of it, and that was his. But anyhow, those tickets just kept going up, and they kept one windshield wiper got full because that's what they did with it was put it up in the windshield wipers, and they kept the other one full, and he just went around with all these yellow tickets flashing up and down, and that was kind of his statement on things. Finally, that got to be enough of a problem that they took that out, and they decided they were going to make downtown more green and more friendly, and so they planted trees all up and down, and they did make it real nice, except that the trees had they had two problems. First, that they attracted birds that made their deposits on the customers' cars, and also the leaves had an awful smell to them, and the blooms kind of made out downtown smell bad. So they had to cut those down. And then they put little cedar barrels in front of the different businesses that would have been really pretty if everybody had kept their flowers up, but nobody did. They just got to be kind of a junky mess. So there was a lot that went on, but it was really, all in all, a pretty congenial place. I want to do a little definition here. When I'm talking about Main Street, what I'm meaning is the blocks that face Will Rogers Boulevard between the tracks, and all the businesses that are on those blocks. They're not some of those face Cherokee or Missouri Street. They don't face Will Rogers, but they're all on that block. And I was careful not to jump anything off of those blocks on either side, and the number of businesses there is just pretty amazing. I'm looking at, I'm thinking of you have the Bungalow Bathhouse at Cherokee and 2nd Street, and of course the Will Rogers Bathhouse. So there were two bathhouses downtown. There are 4 cleaners that I can think of: Streeters, Pals, Archers, and Claremore. The furniture stores I can think of were Walker's and old Mr. Dodson's had used furniture, Clark Mason, and then Smith. I can think of 5 automotive parts outfits. There was one that was just called the Automotive, which is a franchise. A Western Auto, which was Al Cloninger, everybody knew and liked. Greg's Battery, Otasco, R&S Auto Parts, which was Ralph Rock and Huey Schultz. Car dealers, you had Munson Mercury there on Cadillac, Will Rogers. Aldridge Chrysler Plymouth on the corner of Wichita, which is they call it J.M. Davis now, and Will Rogers. And you had several others, car dealers, that were just a block off, but I'm not counting them here. Women's wear, I can think of Vincent's and Dorothy Louise and the Mason Dress Shop, and there may have been more. Men's store, you had strictly a men's store of Kelly's. And children's store, Alice Marshall's. Department stores, we had Penny's, and then with Chastain's that went on to be C.R. Anthony's after that. Banks, both Birch National and Rogers County were downtown. Barbers, I can think of Foster Twist and Jay. And Mr. Burgess there at Sequoia Hotel, and then the Will Rogers Hotel had a barber shop, so there were 4 of those. Confectionaries, we had Bell's, which was Cherokee and Will Rogers, and that's the place where you could get magazines and candy and just all kinds of stuff like that. Drugstores, I can think of 4. You had Rexall, Gentry, and Collins. I like to go to Rexall after school, and I had to make my own money, and so I drank root beer there because it was a nickel where the other pop was a dime. Real estate. Uh, I'm thinking of Smith's at that time. I don't believe Heiligman's was on Main Street. Restaurants, I can think of eight, and over a period between the 50s and 60s, I'm so sure some of those changed. There were others, but I can think of the Mason Hotel had a coffee shop. The Will Rogers Hotel had a coffee shop. Cops Cafe was big until it burned down. The Mission had supposed to have the best hamburgers in town. Majestic Grill was kind of a high end, uh, different kinds of foods. Kleck's Grill was fun. The Cadet Grill, Nell's Cafe, which later ended up being Dots, all down there. So a lot of places to eat. Uh, Two big hardware stores, Wilson's and Halley's. Uh, Two shoe stores that I can think of, Glen Key and Wadley. There was also Claremore Shoe Repair there in Keys. Uh, Jewelers, I can think of Dembo's and Hines. There may have been more. Uh, just lodges. There was the Masonic Lodge, Oddfellows Lodge, and the Elks had already moved by the time of my memory. They may have been down there earlier, and the National Guard Armory. Uh, what was called 10-cent stores then, or 5 and 10, we had McClellan's, Haddad's, and more. And they're basically the equivalent of what we would call a dollar store now, the same type of merchandise. See, you had your utilities downtown. The post office was downtown on that block. ONG was on that block. The city was there. The telephone company was on that block until 1957 when they moved over on Second Street. Doctors, I can think of I can think of four, and I think there were more. Dr. Gordon and old. There was Dr. Gordon and old Dr. Gordon. Uh, Dr. Anderson and old Dr. Anderson, Dr. Billender, Dr. Malloy, uh, all down there close. Dentists, I know of Dr. Green and Dr. Cahoe, and I'm sure more dentists kind of passed through there. Optometrists, we had Dr. Baker and Dr. Beeson. Uh, Theaters, uh, the Cadet Theater was there for a while when I was growing up. The Yale was there mostly, but there on the block. Uh, Hotels, you had the Sequoia and the Mason and the Will Rogers, and that's all I can think of. There may have been some other ones that did it, basically just rented rooms, but those were the ones that were billed as hotels in my growing up. Had a bus station. The bus station was actually there for three lines. It handled Greyhound and Continental and Arcoma Coach. Newspapers. The Progress was there. The World was there. The Tribune was there. Had a bakery downtown. Had a ranch and home store, which would have been like similar to what we would have a Tractor Supply kind of place now. Uh, Beer joints. We had the Cardinal Lounge. We had Dick's Bar #1, Dick's Bar #2, and for a while Dick's Bar #3, all right downtown, handy. Nemo Bicycle Shop had a pawn shop. Old Mister Kelsey was mild mannered and nice. That ran the pawn shop. Uh, Three groceries that I can think of. Hicks Grocery. The Safeway was on that block. Safeway was where the Main Street Tavern is today, and Stone's Grocery as well. Five gas stations on that block. Lincolnfelter's DX on Muskogee, Munson's Pimco on Catalay, Russ's 66, and then there was a Sinclair on 4th Street. Tire shops, I know we had Charlie Boone, of course, Otasco and others handled that. I'm up to 97 now businesses that I can count downtown Claremore at that time. And there was such a difference because the again, Highway 66 uh, came down what you call J.M. Davis now. It's very confusing, the street changes, but what we call Lynn Riggs now was not a 4 lane highway. It was a just a 2 lane street. It was called Cadillac. We didn't say the on the end of Cadillac. It was just Cadillac. Uh, and the street we named for J.M. Davis was named Wichita because then at that time all the north-south street names were based on Indian tribal names. Uh, what we call Patty's Page now was Second Street. So we have those changes to deal with, but they realized pretty quick that you have to think that before the turnpike, all the traffic that's going from if it's going from Chicago to L.A., it's going right down Old 66, which is what we call J.M. Davis now. There's no turnpike, and so uh, all those gas stations and all those motels and so forth were located on J.M. Davis, and there just was too much traffic. When you add that to the city, there needed to be a 4 lane, and it didn't make any sense. They knew going along J.M. Davis they couldn't, you can't deal with the railroad to use that. If they tore out on the east side, they'd be tearing out all of the motels and cafes and so forth. So they just moved it a street over because Cadillac was just kind of a sleepy street there, and they moved it in the late 50s or about 1960. I can still remember the move there, and that changed the way everything flowed through town. When the turnpike was built in 1956, then that slipped a lot of that national traffic over, and that was a blow to a lot of our businesses. We were lucky in towns like Chelsea that it just completely bypassed, and the town just died. Excuse me, people who live in Chelsea maybe don't agree with that, but it certainly took a blow, and a lot of things changed as a result of that. I chose 1970 as an ending point because that was the end of the main street that I grew up with, and a lot of us did. There was one major factor, a lot of smaller factors, but the major factor was, of course, Walmart. When Walmart opened, it essentially meant the end of the traditional downtown across the country. It offered good prices to consumers. It offered a wide selection to consumers. It offered parking, and it was just something that was very difficult for uh, a small merchant to keep up with. In many cases, Walmart was selling items for less than the local business could buy them, and all that spelled an end to the way that business was done. One car families changed to be two car families. People got to be more mobile. There were more shopping centers around, and the competition just dealt a death blow to the old way of doing things. But later things recovered, and we'll talk about that in another episode.